Hey, welcome to Resurrecting Your Freedom. And today we're going to talk about moving from fear into fact, into the resurrection, into a new mindset. Because in this world, there's like a tornado of information going around. Is this true? What's happening here? Is it as bad as we think it is? I'm going to get coronavirus. If I get the virus, am I going to get pneumonia and die? But what about all these people with antibodies? And when are they going to test it? What about the vaccination? What do you know what to believe? I'm Dr. Fred Didomenico. This is Dr. Doug DiSiena. We're both chiropractors. We've both been primary health care providers 36 years, 31 years. That means not only have we been taking care of the general public, but we've been studying viruses, vaccination, how the government and politicians are trying to drive their agenda into the health of America, which we have learned over decades may not necessarily be going the right direction. So we want to give you clarity, because the reality is, who has power over your health and over your life? The government? Ultimately, we're in America. This is about resurrecting freedom. America is the land of the free, right? So our freedoms almost feel like they've been taken, and we need to take control back, but we can only do that when we have the right information and to be able to make decisions that are best for ourselves, more importantly our family, and then we can have the unity that the power of this country was built on.
So let's go back to, how did we start this whole thing? It came really from a study back in England, and it was a faulty paradigm. They talked about a death rate of over 2.6%. Just this week alone, we got 3 studies that came out. The first study came out was from Stanford. All of the press was saying, well, that's a faulty study. There are some faults in the paradigms they took from the study. Within 2 days, USC came out with the study. And both of them concurred that the greater amount of people than they could ever anticipate, 50 to 85 times more, already had antibodies to this COVID-19 virus. So what does that mean? That means the lethal rate is far, far less, something around 1.15%. And Fred, do you know what the flu death rate is?
It's 0.1%.
It's about the same rate.
Yeah.
And then just today, this is fascinating, just today, which is, again, keeping with the paradigm of fear, New York, the epicenter of these United States, where all of this is really happening, they came out with a study. And they show that there are far greater, again, about 50 times greater, the amount of people in the New York City area that has the antibodies for COVID-19. But here's what I want you to talk about. What does the major news media talk about? They don't talk about, wow, this actually gives us great hope, because the lethal rate is far less, again, about 0.1%. than we anticipated, which means the vast majority of us are going to get this virus, going to slough it off. Some of us, most of us may not even get symptoms, and now we're immune to this virus.
Right. Well, and here's what was estimated right in the beginning. There's 330 million Americans. They estimated right from the beginning, 80% of the population is going to be exposed, and we're going to have 25 million deaths, and we need a vaccination, and we know, who's that guy that owns that Microsoft company? Anyway, they made all these claims, and then, oops, now what are they saying? You know what? Sorry, we completely overestimated not only how contagious it is, but the virulence. That means on how strong it is, because now we're finding it's equal to the flu.
Right.
And so let's just say they are right, because now they're finding up to 80 times more, you said,
right,
people making antibodies. So let's just say that they're right, 250 million Americans are being exposed. Then that means we're actually a fairly healthy population, in the sense that our immune systems are working, right? So now that actually takes, because the 0.1% is an estimation based on antibodies, but they can't test 330 million people. It's not going to happen. But if they did, and they did find 250 million people with antibodies, that actually takes the percentage down to 0.0004. And that's even if 100,000 people die, which right now there's 40,000. So even if you double the amount of people that died, it's 4/10,000ths That means 4 people out of 10,000 would actually pass. Now here's the thing, because we're not trying to underplay this or say it's really not that bad, because there's people you know that have passed. And when it's your mom, or when it's an aunt, or when it's a coworker, you have that relationship, we have compassion and empathy. However, here's really the principle. The virus doesn't kill anybody. What happens is, it's a new virus, it's their body's immune system's ability to adapt. Those are the people that pass. And that's why they call it immunosuppressed. Because their nervous system, and neuroimmunology, nervous system controls the immune system, the immune system is not able to adapt. So people with weak immune systems, immunosuppressed, they're not able to adapt, and those are the ones that pass and die. Does that mean, now what's the news tell you? They want to create the fear that if I get the virus, I'm going to get pneumonia and I die. That's why people are in fear, because they think, I don't want to die. When in reality, 0.0004. And that's if 100,000 people die. Now, here's what you don't see on the news. They don't show you the 10% that will create antibodies that never experience the symptoms. So you don't see 9,000 testimonials of people say, wow, I tested positive and I have antibodies and, never heard anything, never saw anything. Well, you don't see the 964 that say, I got coronavirus, I got sick, man, I felt like crap.
Right.
I may have thought I was going to die, but now I'm on the other side. Now, here's the next thing that you know, Doug, is that anybody that dies, here's how a diagnosis works. There was an ER doctor that put a Facebook post and he gave a testimonial. And they said, our responsibility, if someone dies of a heart attack, but they also have diabetes, but they died of a heart attack, we have to write that on there. It's not the cause of death. But he's been told that anybody that dies, regardless of this reason, that tests positive for COVID-19, they have to put that as the cause of death.
Right.
So now you're 0004, but what is it really?
Right. We don't really know.
We don't really know because of false diagnosis.
The concept of people dying from COVID-19 versus people dying with COVID-19.
Or have COVID-19, right.
It's a completely different paradigm. And I just have to go back to the one thing you were talking about. Again, this goes back to the self-empowerment. If you took one person that had an active infection with COVID-19, you put them in a room with 1,000 asymptomatic people, my question to you would be, are all of those people in that room going to get sick with that COVID-19 and die?
No.
What's your response?
Of course not. Actually, there would be a small percentage.
And why is that?
Because they adapt.
Right. And how do they adapt?
Their immune system makes antibodies.
Their immune system makes antibodies, which means we actually have an ability to fight against viruses. We have an innate, inward functionality called an immune system. This immune system is designed to fight against viruses.
Right.
The major news media out there wants you to believe, wants to take that power away from you so you can live in fear, which is why we're self-quarantining, because we have to hide away from the virus, because if we get exposed to the virus, we won't be able to come up to the plate and actually fight against it. When all of these studies are actually showing that the vast majority of people are already were confronted by the virus, and guess what? They already adapted to the virus and created antibodies against said virus.
Exactly. So now when we're going through this again, because I've seen Facebook posts and I know people that know people that have passed or people close to them, and we're are by no means trying to minimize the emotional trauma of having somebody pass. So so there's compassion, there's empathy. And as a doctor, who's taking care of people, we have compassion for people, yet we understand the cause. Now, I have an 83-year-old mother and an 88-year-old father. Now, are they quarantined? Yes. Would I highly recommend that they quarantine? No question. Although they're healthy, they don't have any immune system problems. I don't have to tell them because they're doing it anyway. I would say, Dad, what are you doing? Well, first of all, I did have a conversation with him, and I'll explain this in a second. I go, Daddy, you still going out and exercise? Oh, yeah, I go for my walks every day. Now, you have all this medical study, because what are they trying to do? Give us a vaccination. Now, here's the thing. Every 2 years, we have SARS, we have Ebola, we have H1N1, and there's vaccination. So here's really the question, and here's the point of why we're going through this. How do you want to live? Is this going to be the last epidemic that you ever confront in your life? Do you ever want to go back to that fearful position, experiencing that fear for your life for something you don't know? And what's that answer? Of course, hell no would be the answer. Right. We don't want to go back. So again, we come back, who has control? So we were talking, there's a new, the other side of medicine, the research side, says there's a new medical study. It's called neuroimmunology, right? And what is that? It's showing the relationship between the nervous system and the immune system, and they're actually so interrelated. Now, this is a study right out of Lancet, top world medical research journal. And they say they're so interrelated. It's one, when you have a healthy nervous system, you have a healthy immune system, which means what? You can adapt to any virus.
Right. It's like the concept of psychoneuroimmunology. And consequently to that, the more stressed we are, what happens to our immune system?
Gets weaker.
Gets compromised. Guys, let me play off one thing that you said that I'm really passionate about. So Dr. Fred was saying that there are people who, yes, died of this virus and our hearts go out to them. I personally don't know of anybody, but I do know of people who know people. But here's what I directly know that's going on, and I know people that this is directly affected. You take people and you quarantine them, you increase alcohol and drug abuse. I believe that the use of anti-anxiety drugs are up 38%. You take that and you create a powder keg. And here's what we're knowing now. We know that child abuse and violence, in fact, the American Medical Association just this week said the new epidemic is domestic violence. I have a patient who runs battered women's shelters. And she was telling me they are overrun by battered women right now. We have police officers that we see. They're telling us the number one call right now is domestic violence. So here's the reality.
Well, people are quarantined.
Correct. So the reality is that people are under high amounts of stress. They're consuming a bunch of alcohol because the major news media wants us to live in fear. And it goes back to what? It goes back to not having an understanding that we have this thing called an immune system that actually works. So one of the things I love about you, and you are a master of understanding self-empowerment. So like we talked off camera, if we can give people the faith and the hope for them to realize that when God put us together, he didn't go, oops, I completely forgot about an immune system. When the person is healthy, people don't get sick. Only sick people are getting sick. In fact, 90% of the people that get sick with this COVID-19 have two very serious comorbidities. One being high blood pressure and the other being high blood sugar levels.
Right, and those are the most susceptible, right? So, and then anybody with, actually that comes after that is people with lung problems. Now here's a study, the MD that did this was Dr. Cato, medical doctor. I'm not recalling the resource right off the top of my head. But what did she also say? Why is it geriatrics, and I have a question for you, why is it geriatrics that are most susceptible? Well, they're older, their body's weaker, right? But then it's young adults. Why, that doesn't seem opposite. Why is it geriatrics and young adults are the most susceptible? Because what do you hear? Wow, he was only 20 years old and he got sick. Why are those two demographics the highest and most susceptible? Well, there's a study by this medical doctor that said it's called a hyperkyphosis. It's when your upper back is rounded and your neck is forward. That creates tension on the spinal cord and your autonomic nervous system, the part of your nervous system that makes your organs run, breathe, your heartbeat, and all those things you don't think about, digestion. Autonomic nervous system stimulates your sympathetic system. Sympathetic system is the system you use under stress. Now, here we are. Not only do we live in a technology-based society, but now we're restricted at home. So what are people doing? They're staying in this forward flex posture. Now, why would it be a geriatric? Do you notice old people tend to be hunched? Why would it be young adults? Because they grew up in a technology-based world, heavy backpacks. As a chiropractor, how many young adults do you see that have this type of posture?
What's interesting, I've been in practice since 1984. I never saw a reverse curve up until the cell phone. I take x-rays of all my patients.
So that's curves going backwards,
Correct,
which is what I'm talking about.
Right. It didn't even exist until this new technology.
So now you're seeing all these young adults that are growing up in this flexion distorted posture. They're one of the highest demographics. Why? Because Dr. Cato says when you have this forward flexion posture, not only does it put you under constant stress and tension on the cord like stretching a rubber band, but it shuts down lung function. What organ does the coronavirus affect? Lung function. Because when you're forward, you can't oxygenate all the way down. That's where the fluid in the lungs builds up. That's where you have pneumonia. And that's where it begins to destroy lung tissue, because that hyperkyphotic, that forward flex posture shuts down your ability to breathe. Now you already have that, then it's complicated, and this is why you're seeing it's not that healthy people are dying. They have an underlying cause that reduced their body's ability to adapt to the effect of the virus. Not necessarily the virus, but the effect of the virus.
Right. I wish we can go on about this, and I won't do it because it's way too medical, but
Yeah.
it creates what we call a cytokine storm when the immune system is not properly adapting to it. So what we're really finding out is that healthy people have a reactionary immune system. They react in an appropriate way. People who don't deal with this are people that have a nerve system, therefore an immune system that does not appropriately react. And in fact, in some cases, overreacts, creates a cytokine storm, which is an inflammatory process. Blood doesn't get to the tissue, and then we succumb to the illness.
Well, there you go. And so what's the reason we're giving you all this over and over? You're like, yeah, okay, great. Now, hopefully you find this fascinating, because this is really the truth of how your body works. But what's the difference? Medical science is proving the need for chiropractic, okay? CNN is telling you that CDC, National Institute of Health, the World Health Organization already got busted by Trump, right? And all these organizations, what are they trying to do? Vaccination. What's Bill Gates trying to do? Every man, woman, child is going to be vaccinated. Now, we're going to have a whole podcast on that. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, the vaccination supposedly is going to help antibodies, but the majority of the population is already creating antibodies. So is there a bigger financial agenda? And we already know what that answer is.
Yes.
Because we're gonna create a whole podcast on exactly what's going on with this. But the reality is, Gates has already asked for indemnity. What's indemnity mean? It means he doesn't want any financial responsibility for the first 700,000 deaths from the vaccination. So why are we telling you?
Talk back. Say that number again, because you said it so quickly.
700,000.
And how many do we predict that will die from this particular COVID-19?
Well, right now, there's only 45,000.
45,000. So we just have to get those numbers.
Put them in perspective.
I know I'm smiling, but that actually, it's breaking my heart. Because we're already pre-framing the idea that it's okay that 700,000 people are going to die from a necessary injection, which...
He says it's okay.
He says it's okay.
Right.
Right.
Now, this is another whole thing we don't want to get into too much, but hey, just real quick, there was a video the other day where he's on there with his wife. I forget his wife's name. Melinda. Yeah, now they're saying every man, woman, child around the world needs to be vaccinated for coronavirus. Now Bill Gates is doing this. Right? And what is Melinda? She's saying, well, it has to be, and she's going like this. It has to be equitable for everyone. So while Bill's going like this, he actually believes this shit he's saying. Obviously, Melinda's following him. She's not believing it.
That's great.
She knows it's a moneymaker. Now, I study body language, right? So I'm sitting there going, look at her. And here's the words they choose. Equitable. What didn't she choose? Reciprocal. Mm-hmm. Reciprocal is both people benefit. Equitable is one person's getting all the money. And she's going, we want an equitable relationship. And she's shaking her head no. That's going to be another whole podcast.
Real quick, another podcast we should, as we discuss this. India. If we can look at, you always want to go back and look what happened. That gives you a prediction of what may happen in the future. We go back and we look at what happened to India and the vaccination program that the Gates Foundation did there, and it was a travesty. It resulted in paralysis and deaths of the Indian people. So I hope we get to a podcast and we can actually discuss that as a future for us if we allow this to continue.
Not I hope, just follow our podcast.
There you go.
So here's really the bottom line, gang. Well, they're asking for indemnity for the first 700,000. That means millions will probably get coronavirus. So what you're going to see if they do come out with it, which I'm sure they're going to, you're going to see a massive spike. And then everybody's going to want to hide again and put their masks on. And that's another whole podcast right there. But what's really going to happen? You just stood in your house for 60 days. We have all these challenges. You're out of work. You're out of all that. You want to come out of your house, run to a vaccination, and then you get sick? Is that really the answer? Now, what is CNN not telling you? Neuroimmunology. If they actually told you everybody should be under chiropractic care, you need to go to a chiropractor that aligns your spine so your immune system, so your nervous system can build your immune system, that would crash all pharmaceutical companies. It would crash, medicine would be reduced to crisis care, which we have the best #1 crisis care system in the world. I think we're 37th down from that, or something in the 30s from the healthiest country. Medicine would be where it needs, and you would have the confidence that no matter what comes along, epidemic, that your body would be strong because you know exactly what to do to bring out what God already gave inside you.
Well, that comes back to the concept of this. Either you believe that we are lacking somehow a vaccination, so therefore we can't compete in the world where our viruses are living, or you believe that God gave us this thing called an innate intelligence, which I'd love for you to explain a little bit more, and an immune system that actually functions. So we believe in building up host resistance. They are trying to fight a virus. And the last time I checked, we've been on this planet for how many thousands of years. We have not been able to eradicate viruses. They somehow know how to morph into other things. We do have a host immune system. That's obviously we're still on this planet, so we believe in building the host rather than fighting the virus.
Well, that's what research posts. So I want to give you one final thought that is a mindset thought and will help you, rather than look out the window for an answer, to be able to look in the mirror. And that is, it's a famous quote that I'll paraphrase from Stedman Graham, also famously known as Oprah's husband, right? Although he's a great leader around the world. And I heard him on a podcast and he said, if you don't give yourself an identity, then the world will give you an identity. Now, what the world, what the CDC and what the news, the identity they're trying to give you is you are less than a virus. Now, here's the problem. When the world gives you an identity because you're looking out the window rather than in the mirror, the identity they give you will be less than them. So the identity they're trying to give you is the virus is bigger than you are. And that's not the way it is. Now, I'm sorry for the people that have passed. They didn't have the ability to adapt. Yeah, I would be fascinated to be able to x-ray their spine and see what their spine looked like, just for my own. And however, there's still compassion and empathy. Hey, no matter what, it's 290 to 650,000 people die of the flu every year. I don't think there's going to be even that many people that die of the coronavirus.
Right.
However, the bottom line is the people that have passed, we have sympathy. Yet, what identity are you going to give yourself? If you don't give yourself a more empowering identity, the identity that God gave us, right? The identity that we give ourselves, the identity that we live in the land of the free and we get to decide our health care, then you're going to want to look up the facts and understand exactly what's your most empowered choice. I can tell you right now, it ain't vaccination. You'd be better off going to a chiropractor, understanding neuroimmunology, dealing with your nutrition, Look
Exercise.
at exercise,
Eating sunshine.
mental health, spirituality, getting out in the sun. There's 8 million things, but what's foundation? Your nervous system controls your immune system.
Right.
Make sure your spine's in line, make empowered decisions, and share this podcast around the world.
Can I just add to one thing?
Yeah.
So one thing Dr. Fred said, which I love, and I love him, is he talks about what is God's identity? What does he say about you? Here's what I know. This is what he says about me. He says that greater is he that is in me than he that is in the world. He says that he does not give me a spirit of fear, but one of sound mind, no stress. He also tells me that I am wonderfully knit. I am fearfully, respectively knit in my mother's womb, which means that he did, in fact, give me all those things essential so I can go out and live in this world in a free way. That I do not need to live upon or depend upon outside chemicals to allow me to survive.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
No question. Hey, when you have that inside out identity, there's nothing outside of you that's bigger, nor is this coronavirus. So let's live empowered. Let's resurrect our freedom. Let's make this, America is a great country. Hey, we are leading the world, right? This is about freedom. It's not about communism. It's not about control. And let's stand up for our rights so the government in this country can do the right thing, rather than be suppressive, but be empowered. And it starts with us. Thanks, you guys. Follow this Resurrecting Our Freedom podcast.
Talk soon.